Hey guys, tonight we slip back through time quietly, gently to the cool darkness of a medieval village, where the stars are pale, and the streets are lined with moss-covered stones and sleeping dogs. The air is still, except for the occasional far-off owl and the subtle rustle of wind across thatched rooftops. You move slowly, your footsteps soft on the damp earth, as you approach a small cottage with a faint glow flickering from behind its wooden shutters. Inside, a fire burns low, and candles have been lit in uneven rows on a shelf made from an old door plank. There's a bowl of water steaming near the hearth, herbs hanging from the rafters, and the unmistakable hush of something ancient and deeply human about to unfold. In the corner of the room, on a straw-stuffed mattress, a woman groans softly, not in pain exactly, but in the slow rhythm of labor. The midwife kneels nearby, wrapping warm cloths and murmuring something that's half prayer, half instruction. You won't survive this. You know, at least not in medieval terms. Childbirth then was risky, uncertain, and incredibly brave. But tonight, you're only watching. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to leave a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a seat beside the fire. The midwife doesn't look up. She's busy folding a linen cloth, inspecting it for her sleeves are rolled, and there's a pot of something herbal warming nearby. Its scent faintly bitter and slightly floral, mugwort, maybe, or comfrey. Her hands are dry but practiced, and she barely seems to notice how late the hour has become. For her, this is a familiar rhythm. Outside, the village is silent. No carts, no voices, just the moon slowly climbing above the trees, and the deep, invisible hush of a community that trusts the midwife more than they trust any doctor. You glance around the room. No fancy equipment, no shiny tools, a basin of warm water, a handful of oil, a twisted iron charm hanging above the door, probably for protection. A tiny carved figure of the Virgin Mary sits on the windowsill, half hidden by a linen curtain. This is not a hospital, and yet it has everything needed. Because in this world, birth is not medical, it's something older, something sacred and terrifying and entirely normal. The woman on the bed stirs again, moaning this time with a bit more urgency. The midwife glances at her, nods once, and reaches into a small cloth bag. She pulls out a waxed leather pouch and, with quick fingers, pinches some ground powder into the steaming water. The scent changes earthier now, a little spicy, probably powdered fennel or rue dot. The woman's sister sits nearby, holding a candle and biting her fingernail. She hasn't spoken in an hour. You wonder if she's counting the minutes or praying beneath her breath. This isn't the woman's first child. The midwife had said earlier, her third, actually, and she carries low an old sign. The midwife insists that the baby will come before dawn. No one argues, not with her. Through the open shutter, you catch a breeze. Somewhere, a rooster crows, early confused by the lamplight, and then comes a new sound, a gasp. The woman arches, her breath hitching sharply, and the midwife leans in, hands steady. No panic, no raised voices, only calm motion. You notice then how different it is from how birth is usually shown. No frantic rushing, no loud screaming, no white coats, just steady breath, hands on belly, a cloth placed under the hips. The midwife murmurs again, her voice low and soft as moss. It sounds like she's naming saints, maybe lost family, or maybe just a pattern of comfort repeated for years. There's a rhythm to the whole thing, almost musical. A contraction, a cloth dipped in water, a hushed reassurance. The fire crackles, then another contraction, another breath. Midwives like her were often the only medical figures women ever saw. No schooling, no diplomas, just experience passed down from mother to daughter, sometimes aunt to niece. Oral knowledge, some of it centuries old, and yes, plenty of superstition mixed in, like not stepping over a dog during pregnancy or keeping iron near the bed to ward off spirits. Historians still argue whether these beliefs helped or hindered, but the outcomes, they were often better than you'd expect. You stretch your legs quietly, the wooden floor creaks a little, and the midwife casts a glance your way, not annoyed, just noticing. You imagine she's seen plenty of anxious onlookers pacing, praying, or even fainting. You're doing better than most. Outside, dawn is just brushing the sky. A thin line of rose appears above the dark horizon. It's almost time. The mother's breathing has changed shorter now, more focused. The midwife rises, washes her hands again, and wraps a clean cloth around her palms. She nods to the sister, who sets down the candle and kneels nearby. The air feels stiller, heavier. No one says a word. You don't need to. A child is about to enter a world lit by firelight and guarded by a woman who has walked this path more times than she can count. The door creaks in the wind, the charm swings gently, and the Virgin Mary watches from the sill with quiet eyes. And so the night becomes morning, not loudly, not dramatically, but in steady breaths and soft cloth, and the practiced hands of a midwife who knows far more than anyone gives her credit for. It's later now. The baby has arrived, small, wrinkled, red-faced, and surprisingly quiet, swaddled tightly in linens that smell faintly of rosemary and old soap. The infant lies nestled in her mother's arms, eyes blinking against the flicker of firelight. The midwife has done her job. Again, she is cleaning up with unhurried motions, pouring out the birthing water, laying soiled linens in a wide wooden bowl. There is no hurry. There rarely is. You might think a midwife would be specially trained, perhaps apprenticed, perhaps taught by a physician or licensed by the local church. But in truth, most midwives were simply women of the village, mothers, widows, sometimes even grandmothers. Some had delivered dozens of babies. Others had only assisted once or twice before being asked to take over. There were no textbooks, no diagrams, no hospitals. What they knew from memory and from the bodies and stories of the women who came before them. And yet, they were trusted. Midwives often started young. A girl might be asked to help with water fetching or linen folding when she was still barely past childhood. And if she was good, quiet, steady, strong of stomach, she might be invited to stay for the delivery. From there, she would learn by watching, and watching again, and again. Experience was everything. She might not know the Latin names for a pelvis or a cervix, but she knew the sound a laboring woman made when she was close to pushing. She could tell by the smell of the room if something was wrong. She knew how to turn a baby by feel, not by theory. Midwifery wasn't always a chosen path. Sometimes it was a necessity. If no one else could be found, or if a midwife had died during a plague or a famine, someone had to step in. And often, the woman who stepped in never stepped out again. She became the midwife by default, and stayed that way for the rest of her life. It wasn't glamorous work. It was long hours, hard lifting, and always carried a shadow of danger. If a baby died, or a mother didn't survive, there were whispered questions. Was the midwife careful enough? Did she use the wrong herb? Did she anger God? In some towns, midwives were licensed, usually by the church, and sworn to uphold certain rules. They were expected to baptize infants in emergencies, to report illegitimate births, and to avoid using pagan charms. But the rules were blurry, and enforcement was rare. In rural areas, midwives answered to no one but their neighbors, and sometimes not even them. They worked alone or with a friend. They carried their tools in a cloth bundle, and they walked to births in the dead of night, through rain, snow, or frost, with nothing but a lantern and instinct to guide them. And yet, despite the hardships, despite the risk, midwives were often deeply respected. Villagers brought them bread, eggs, wine. A good midwife might be better fed in winter than the local priest. She was trusted with secrets, with suffering, and with beginnings. You shift in your seat beside the fire as the midwife finishes folding a fresh linen cloth. The baby gurgles, the mother smiles faintly in her sleep, and the midwife holds Bonte and quiet just sits a moment and watches the flame. She might not remember all the babies she's helped bring into the world, but you can tell from her eyes that she remembers the difficult ones, the near misses, the stillness, the joy, the time a baby didn't cry until the rooster crowed. This isn't a profession, it's a calling, not named by certificates or approved by any university. Just earned birth by birth, night by night, breath by breath. And now she stands, pours herself a cup of weak beer from the hearth, and sips. The rest of the village is waking up, but her night is finally done. You glance down at the bundle the midwife carries, tied up with coarse cloth and softened by use, the corners darkened from years of soot and weather. It's not much to look at, really, just a lumpy little sack, but inside, that's where centuries of inherited wisdom live, nestled together like a clutch of sleeping hens. There's no gleaming silver or polished instruments here. No scalpels or syringes. Just the quiet tools of a woman who expects things to go the natural way unless, of course, they don't. First comes the thread. Long and sturdy. Usually linen, boiled in water to keep it clean, or at least clean enough. It's used to tie off the cord once the baby is out. Sometimes red thread was favored thought to ward off evil spirits that might lurk in the corners of the birthing room, waiting to slip in during that vulnerable moment between first breath and first cry. Then the herbs, dried and bundled in little leather pouches or wrapped in scraps of muslin. Penurial, raspberry leaf, chamomile. Some were for pain, others for bleeding, and a few whispered about. Never written down for when the baby came too soon, or not at all. There's a small wooden spoon and a cup for mixing infusions, a sliver of beeswax candle, not only for light, but also to drip into oil, rubbed gently onto the mother's back or belly. You might even spot a few mysterious charms tucked away at the bottom, a scrap of a saint's robe, a smoothed stone from a nearby stream, a small iron key. Some were blessings, others were insurance. All were kept just in case. Not every item had a clear function. A worn comb might be brought out for the mother to grip during contractions. It gave her something to focus on, something to hold. A piece of soft cloth soaked in vinegar might be placed on the forehead during the final push. No one knew exactly why it helped. It just did. Some midwives carried a little book, though very few could read it. It might contain prayers or herbal recipes written down generations before. Or maybe it was just for show to make the neighbors feel a little safer when things looked grim. And the oil, always oil, usually olive, though goose fat would do. Warmed slightly and used with infinite gentleness, it helped ease the stretching skin, and in difficult births, it was rubbed on the baby's shoulders or head to guide them out, inch by careful inch. Even more important than what she carried was how she carried herself, calmly, steadily, with hands that didn't shake, and a voice that never rose above a whisper, even when the room filled with shouting. Because the most powerful thing in a midwife's kit wasn't an object at all, it was her presence, her patience, the way she made time slow down, the way she could walk into a candlelit room full of blood and fear and make it feel like a lullaby. That there were tales, of course, about midwives who used forbidden things, ones who carried poppy resin in secret or muttered old charms under their breath, which was a label never far away. But most were simply practical women doing the best they could with what little they had. You reach toward the cloth bundle as she unknots it, revealing the same tools her mother once showed her. In a room just like this one, under the same flickering oil lamp, she doesn't need to explain any of them. Their stories are worn into the threads and folds. And anyway, she has work to do. Outside, the rooster crows. Another birth waits down the lane. She wrapped her kit again, sling it over one shoulder, and disappear into the misty grey of morning, quiet as ever. It's just past midnight now, and the room is heavy with stillness except for the soft rustle of blankets and the labored breathing of the woman on the bed. You're there, just beside the midwife, who sits patiently on a low stool, hands folded in her lap, eyes trained on the curve of the laboring mother's belly. The room is warm, maybe too warm. A brazier glows in the corner, fed with peat and dried lavender stems that pop faintly in the coals. It smells earthy and sharp, like dust and old tea leaves. A candle flickers on the windowsill, its wax pooling in lazy swirls. Shadows leap across the wooden beams overhead, tracing crooked patterns like spider legs across the ceiling. This is where most babies entered the world in medieval Europe, not in sterile chambers or under watchful surgeons, but in small low-ceilinged cottages with earthen floors and worn woolen blankets. Not sterile, no, but full of care, of instinct, of quiet courage. The mother groans, not loudly, more like the slow exhale of a bellows. Her hair clings to her temples, and her hands grip the sides of the bed, knuckles white beneath the skin. She's done this before, you can tell. The midwife says nothing, just waits, timing her breath by the contractions she could do it with. Her eyes closed, and all around them, the room has its own rhythm. A tin cup rattles gently with each shift of the bed. Floorboards creak in sympathy. Outside, the wind drags its fingers across the shutters. You start to realize that this isn't a moment of chaos, it's a strange, suspended calm, like the eye of a storm, only warmer. Midwives often asked for silence during birth. Too much noise, they believed, might frighten the child or invite spirits. And while modern scholars may scoff, there's something eerie about the hush that falls over a laboring room. It's reverent, it's sacred. Not that everything was smooth. Sometimes the baby didn't come, or came too quickly, or came wrong. This is when the midwife reached for her deepest knowledge, not from books, but from memory. The time her mentor had taught her how to turn a breech baby with just 2 fingers. The herbal tincture that sometimes stopped a postpartum bleed. The moment to look into the mother's eyes and say, firmly but gently, "You are safe." No tools for cutting here. If something went wrong, it was the midwife who had to decide how long to wait, how long to hope, and sometimes, whether to save the mother or the child. This isn't to say it was always grim. Far from it. When things went well, there was joy, bright and immediate. The baby would come, wrinkled and wailing, and the mother would cry too, and the midwife would grin and hold up the little bundle like a miracle pulled from fire. And oh, the noises after birth, the soft babble of welcome, the slosh of warm water poured into a basin, the midwife singing a low, tuneless lullaby as she wrapped the baby tight and tucked them against the mother's chest. Nothing fancy, nothing polished, but in that candlelit room, it felt like the universe had just been reset. Once the cord was cut and tied, the placenta delivered and inspected, the midwife would wipe her hands on a cloth and settle into the background again. She didn't linger in the spotlight. Her job was to guide, not to star. Sometimes she stayed the night, slept on the floor or in a chair, just in case. Sometimes she took her bundle and slipped into the dark before dawn, the door creaking shut. Behind her, historians still argue whether midwives were truly respected in their time, more merely tolerated. Were they protectors of life, or tolerated helpers in a system that still blamed women when things went wrong? The records don't always agree, but the candles do. The walls remember. And so do the women who lay on those beds, clutching hands, whispering prayers, and breathing their babies into the world. Now the candle's almost burned out, its flame just a sleepy eyelid of light. The room is quiet again, but this time there's one more breath in it, a smaller one, new, whole, hungry, for tomorrow.